Hi, my name's Arden, and last weekend I stood inside a chapel filled with 500 smiling guests when my own brother slapped me across the face. Why? Because I refused to hand over 70% of the company I built with my own two hands. And while I stood there, humiliated, stunned, my parents didn't defend me. They shouted, "You owe this family," like I was nothing more than a bill they'd been waiting to cash in. But what they didn't know was that someone in that crowd, a federal judge, was quietly watching every second. They thought they were breaking me that day. They had no idea. They were digging their own grave. The valet took my keys with a nod I'd seen too many times, a half-polished kind of respect, like he wasn't sure if I was a guest or someone working the event. The Fairmont in downtown Houston was lit up like a wedding magazine cover. Gold trim, floating candles, too many orchids for one evening. It looked expensive, and I should know. I paid for nearly a third of it, but I didn't mention that to anyone. That was the rule with my family. You help quietly, or you don't help at all. I adjusted my collar and stepped through the revolving doors, the scent of jasmine and champagne already thick in the air. I scanned the crowd, cousins in rented tuxes, aunts wearing gowns they couldn't quite afford, laughter bouncing off the marble walls. Everyone was there for Corbin. That was clear from the minute I walked in. I spotted the reception table and made my way over, expecting the usual small talk, but the woman behind the clipboard didn't even look up when I said my name. Arden Voss. She skimmed the list. I don't see that name. Maybe try the back row? I hesitated. I'm the groom's brother. She gave a rehearsed smile. I'm sure there's a seat for you somewhere. Somewhere. The word stung more than it should have. I walked through the ballroom, my eyes trailing along rows of white and gold name cards. Jennifer, Michael, Aunt Doreen. Even second cousins I hadn't seen since Dad's retirement party had prime seating. But not me. Near the far wall, just beside the kitchen entrance, sat a chair. One. No name tag. No napkin. Just a chair. You can sit there if you want. A bridesmaid mumbled as she passed, not even slowing her step. I sat, not because I wanted to, but because pretending it didn't matter was easier than asking why it did. From this corner, I could see everyone, but barely. I was hidden behind a column and a balloon arch spelling out "Forever Corbin and Marla." I took a deep breath, let it sit in my chest like a stone. Mom and Dad entered with their usual flair, Mom's necklace catching the light like it was auditioning for a commercial. I stood to wave. They saw me. I know they did. They smiled at Corbin, who was mid-laugh with Marla's father. My wave hung in the air like an unwanted thought. Corbin spotted me next. "You're late?" he called out, grinning, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. I checked my watch. 5:58 p.m. Dinner was set for 6. "I'm early," I said. "Early for what?" he said, already turning away. "The waiter brought out appetizers. I wasn't offered one." Marla, in a white rehearsal dress that screamed, "Look at me," made her rounds. When she passed my table, my chair, she barely looked. No smile, no word. Just a glance like I was staff. Invisible. Twist S1 was already settled. I wasn't part of the story. Not tonight. Twist S2? It was the damn chair. Every time I shifted, the metal legs scraped against the floor like an apology. I could feel the symbolism burning into my spine. The seat without a name. The place without a place. Corbin finally approached, drink in hand, tie loosened like he was already celebrating. "Hey," he said casually, leaning in like we were friends. "Did you bring the documents?" I blinked. "What documents?" He smirked. We'll talk after dinner. And just like that, he walked away. I stared down at the empty plate in front of me, realizing it wasn't even set properly. No silverware, no water glass. I used to think silence was strength, that staying quiet meant peace, but tonight it felt like surrender. I built my company from scratch, late nights, ramen noodles, rejections that could crush a man. When I finally made it, they started calling it ours. They started asking, assuming, even planning, without me. Still, I showed up tonight. I came, because despite everything, part of me still wanted to believe in this family. A distant relative walked past and nodded at me. You serving wine? I didn't answer. Later, I noticed my name was missing from the printed schedule booklet on each table. It listed the speeches, the toast, the first dance. Everyone had a mention. I wasn't even an guest. I could feel the slow simmer beneath my skin, like someone was dimming my existence one bulb at a time. As the speeches started, I tried to listen, but my mind wandered. What else had they planned? What did Corbin mean? The documents. Was tonight just a preview of tomorrow? I pressed my hands against my thighs, grounding myself. Stay calm. Don't make a scene. Don't give them what they expect. Still, the hurt was there, building, waiting. And then, just as the music lowered for the final toast, Corbin leaned over. He smiled, raised his glass, and whispered something only I could hear. Tomorrow, you'll finally understand your place. The air left the room, or maybe it was just my lungs. He didn't flinch when he said it. I hope you're ready to sign tomorrow. I turned slowly toward him, trying to keep my voice steady. Sign what? Corbin gave me that same smug half-smile he's worn since we were kids, and he figured out how to charm teachers while I stayed behind cleaning up his messes. You'll see, he said, swirling the ice in his glass. Dad and Mom are already on board. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it, like the ink had already dried. I didn't say anything back. My jaw was tight, and I didn't trust what might come out if I opened my mouth. I sat through the rest of the evening, barely hearing the speeches, watching the waitstaff clear tables, feeling the energy in the room shift entirely. By the time people started drifting out into the warm Houston night, I was the last to leave the ballroom. I stepped into the hallway toward the coat check when I felt Corbin's hand on my arm. Come here, he said. He led me a few steps down a side corridor, one of those service hallways lit by fluorescent strips and the scent of lemon cleaner. He looked over his shoulder, then pulled a navy folder from his inner jacket pocket. This is what you're signing tomorrow, he said, handing it over like it was a wedding favor. I opened it. My chest went still. Inside were preliminary transfer documents, my company's name typed in bold at the top, followed by legalese I knew all too well. Ownership restructuring, 70% to Corbin Voss. For a moment, I just stared at it. Then I laughed, short, dry, and without joy. You've got to be kidding. But Corbin didn't even blink. I'm dead serious. This is a joke, right? I asked. You typed this up to mess with me? He shook his head. You'll announce it after the toasts tomorrow. Just say it was always the plan, that the company's finally becoming a family business. It'll look generous, humble. I looked up at him. You think I'm handing over what I built with my own hands? He tucked his hands in his pockets, cocked his head. Arden, let's not do this dance. You owe this family. Without us, you wouldn't have made it. We supported you. We covered for you when you were still failing. This is about giving back. That word, slammed into my gut like a punch. The last time I heard that tone, I was 24, broke, optimistic, trying to get my startup off the ground in a leaky apartment in Dallas. Corbin had tanked a real estate flip, and my parents came to me, asking if I could help your brother out just a little. I pulled $5,000 from a loan I couldn't afford, wired it to him with a note that said, "Don't worry about paying me back." He didn't. When the business failed 6 months later, and I asked what happened, Dad just said, "You're young. You'll bounce back." Corbin has responsibilities now, a mortgage, a fiancé. That was the moment I learned. In this family, Corbin's failures were investments. My sacrifices were expected, and I'd made them. Again and again. That flashback ended as quickly as it came. Now, staring at these documents in my hand, I finally saw the pattern. Not as miscommunication, not as a misunderstanding, but a structure they built brick by brick. A structure I had lived under my entire adult life. "No," I said. "I'm not signing this." Corbin stepped closer. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You sign or you humiliate the entire family." That one hit harder than I expected. Humiliating the family was our original sin, the unforgivable crime. We were raised to believe that respectability was currency. Keep your head down. Smile for pictures. Never air dirty laundry. I swallowed that instinct, stared him straight in the eyes. "You want me to humiliate myself instead?" The hallway suddenly felt tighter, like the air had thickened. And then came the footsteps. My mother appeared first, followed by Dad, both dressed for photos, not conflict. She looked at me like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "Arden, don't ruin your brother's big day." Dad added, "You wouldn't even have that company if it weren't for the name you carry." I felt heat rise behind my eyes, not from sadness, not even anger, but from the sheer audacity of it all. These people were rewriting history in real time. "You think I owe him because we share a last name?" I said. "I worked 3 jobs and built this from scratch. Where were you when I was eating peanut butter for dinner to make rent?" My father didn't flinch. "We gave you values, stability. That's what helped you succeed." I almost laughed again. "Stability? We were one mortgage scared away from falling apart during most of my teenage years. Corbin got bailed out. I got ignored. Corbin tried again. If you don't sign, we'll tell people the truth about you." I paused. "What truth?" He smiled, slow and confident. "The version people will believe." It wasn't even a threat. It was a performance. He didn't need it to be true. He needed it to be loud. I closed the folder, handed it back to him like it was poison. "I'm not signing," I said, quietly but clearly. For the first time that evening, Corbin didn't have a comeback. And I realized, neither did I. Not one that would fix this. I didn't storm out or raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I just walked back through the hallway, past the coats, past the dying centerpieces, through the doors that still smelled like hotel disinfectant. The Houston air hit my face like a slap, warm and sharp. I stood there for a moment, the sound of traffic humming behind me. For the first time in years, I felt awake, still bruised, still hurting, but more aware than ever of what I'd allowed and what I wouldn't allow again. And I knew tomorrow wouldn't be just a wedding, it would be a war. The parking lot lights buzzed faintly overhead as I stood there, trying to steady my breathing. Corbin's threat still rang in my ears, but as I took a few steps toward my car, something inside me tugged backward, pulling me into a memory I hadn't visited in years. It came back so fast it almost stopped me in my tracks. I could feel the thick summer air of Beaumont again, humid enough to cling to your skin, carrying the familiar scent of engine oil from my father's workshop. Back then, the sound of crickets filled the yard, and the porch light gave everything a yellow glow. I was 17, still hopeful, still believing that effort and loyalty were enough to earn a place in any room, including my own family's. That night, Dad called me outside after dinner. His voice wasn't angry, but it had that clipped tone he used whenever he was about to teach me something. I wiped my hands on my jeans and followed him out to the driveway. The gravel crunched under his boots as he stopped near the truck. He didn't ease into it. He never did. "Your brother's made a mistake," he said. Another business deal didn't go his way. I waited for the rest, maybe advice, maybe concern, but his eyes settled on me with a kind of cold expectation. Then came the sentence that marked me for decades. "If you want this family to love you, you help your brother. That's how you earn your place." I remember standing there, the air thick, the cicadas humming loud enough to drown out my pulse. I didn't fully understand what he meant, but I understood enough. Love wasn't guaranteed. It was conditional. My father said those words the way people recite church verses, like they were truth, like questioning them would be a sin. Something inside me cracked then, not loudly, quietly. The kind of break you don't hear but feel forever. I opened my mouth to respond, but my mother stepped outside, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. "Don't bring shame on us," she added, as if the idea of refusing wasn't even imaginable. "Your brother has more responsibilities. You know that." There it was again. Corbin first, always. I didn't argue. I walked back into the house, picked up the envelope Dad left on the counter, and handed over every dollar I had saved from mowing lawns, helping at the workshop, and summer jobs that kept me up past midnight. That moment became a blueprint. Give quietly. Don't question. Don't upset anyone. Smile even when you bleed. The memory faded as a passing car pulled me back into the present. The hotel lights reflected off my windshield, and I finally reached the driver's side door. Standing there, I realized the same script had just been reenacted 20 years later. "If you don't sign, you'll shame the family." It was the same message, wrapped in adult clothing. All those years thinking I was choosing peace, when really, I had been conditioned to surrender. Every sacrifice I made, every time I let them take, every time I stayed silent, it wasn't because I lacked strength. It was because I was trained not to use it. I leaned against my car for a moment, letting that truth settle into me. And for the first time, instead of guilt, I felt something else rise up. Clarity. The kind that burns quietly until it's too bright to ignore. Why did I believe I owed them anything? Why did their version of loyalty always mean I had to lose something? Why did I think saying no would destroy the family, when saying yes was destroying me? I opened the car door and slipped into the driver's seat. The night felt heavier now, but different, less suffocating, more honest. Before I could start the engine, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "We need to talk before the ceremony tomorrow. Don't be difficult." My jaw tightened so hard it ached. The words were familiar. Another rule disguised as guidance. But this time, the sting didn't land the same way. Hurt was there, yes, but something at its edges was shifting. It felt like a chain loosening link by link. I looked at the message, at the reflection of the screen lighting up my face, and I knew, deep in a place I'd ignored for years, that this was the last time I'd accept that tone, that expectation, that demand to shrink so someone else could stand taller. I wasn't their burden. I wasn't their safety net. And I wasn't signing anything. The next morning didn't start with an alarm or the clatter of room service. It started with clarity. A strange calmness had settled over me like a second skin. I sat up in bed at Hotel Indigo, the sun slipping in through the sheer curtains, casting clean, golden lines across the carpet. The air conditioning hummed steadily, but I felt warmer than usual, awake in a way I hadn't felt in years. I showered, shaved, dressed slowly, each movement deliberate. No rush, no anxious checking of my phone, even though I knew what was coming. By 10:15 a.m., I was walking through the lobby. The glass walls glinted with sunlight, and people moved through the space in quiet celebration. Wedding guests in soft pastels, clinking coffee cups, hushed laughter. But I wasn't here for pleasantries. When I entered the hotel lounge, I found them already there. My mother sat upright in a high-backed armchair, her hands folded in her lap so tightly the knuckles had gone pale. My father stood behind her, arms crossed, expression unreadable, his usual posture when pretending to be neutral but leaning toward pressure. Corbin, still half-dressed in his rehearsal tux from the night before, tapped his fingers on the table like a man who thought time owed him something. "Arden," my mother said without standing, "let's not stretch this out. Your brother needs you to be reasonable." Corbin gave a dry laugh. "We're not asking for a limb, just your signature. You do that, and we can all enjoy the ceremony tomorrow." I looked each of them in the eye before sitting down. No hesitation, no smile. "I'm not signing anything," I said evenly. 3 blinks followed, my mother's, my father's, and Corbin's. Not dramatic, just disbelief, like I'd spoken in another language. My father was the first to react. "You're being ungrateful," he said sharply. "This family helped you become who you are." I leaned forward slightly. "No," I answered. "I became who I am despite what this family demanded of me. I built my company from nothing. You weren't there the nights I slept in the warehouse. You didn't see the winters with no heat. You weren't there when I pitched to 20 investors in a week and got turned down by every single one. That was me. Alone." Corbin rolled his eyes. "We're not denying your hustle, Arden, but you owe the family its fair share." That phrase, fair share, hit me like a shot of cold water. It dragged yesterday's memory from the shadows. My father saying, "If you want this family to love you, you help your brother." This time, the sting wasn't there. Only silence. Corbin reached into a leather folder and slid it across the table. "You've already agreed, months ago. We just need it formalized." I flipped the folder open and scanned the contents. Emails, some altered, some entirely fabricated. A draft contract with my digital signature already placed. A memo suggesting I'd agreed to transfer majority ownership back in April. My breath didn't catch, my pulse didn't race. I just looked up and said, "This is forgery." My mother didn't flinch. "We thought this would make it easier." My father added, "It's already with the lawyers. You can save face by signing today." Save face. That was the phrase they always used when threatening me in soft voices. And for a second, just a second, I faltered. My mind darted. What if this costs me everything? What if I lose the company over this mess? What if they're a step ahead? Then I caught Corbin's face, that smug little smirk. He wore it during every game we played as kids. Every time he convinced our parents I was the one who broke something. Every time he made trouble and stepped away clean. I closed the folder gently and pushed it back across the table. "These signatures are fake," I said. And you know it. My father's voice snapped across the space. Don't you dare accuse this family of fraud. I'm not, I replied, still calm. I'm accusing you of lying. That's different. A couple across the room looked up from their coffee, tried to pretend they weren't listening. But the tension had its own gravity now. My mother lowered her voice, her tone flat and practiced. Sign the papers, Arden. Don't make this a scene. You'll humiliate all of us. Corbin leaned forward. Do it for the family name. No, I said. It came out quieter than I expected, but the silence afterward made it feel louder than a shout. Not anymore. That word, no, felt like a doorway cracking open after decades sealed shut. My father stepped forward, looming. If you walk out of here, you're done with this family. My hands were steady as I stood. Maybe I've been done for a long time. His jaw tightened. My mother looked like she might cry, but I didn't believe it. Corbin didn't even try to look hurt. He just sneered. Then you'll regret this, he said, at the ceremony tomorrow. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. I turned without another word, but before I could take my second step, my mother's voice caught me in the back, low, cold, precise. Maybe if you had been more like your brother, we wouldn't have had to go this far. All your success means nothing if your own family thinks you're a disgrace, she said. That line stayed with me like a splinter under the skin, impossible to ignore. I walked out of the hotel, sunlight too sharp against my face, my chest wound tight like a coiled spring. The noise of traffic blurred around me. My legs moved, but I barely registered where I was heading. By the time I reached my truck, I sat behind the wheel without turning the key, just breathing, or trying to. For nearly 10 minutes, I didn't move. My hands wouldn't stay still on the steering wheel. I clenched them, released, clenched again. And then the thoughts came, uninvited, too familiar. Maybe I really am the problem. Maybe they're not cruel. Maybe I just can't take a joke. Maybe they're right. It was like hearing an old tape play. My teenage self trying to rationalize being treated like a backup plan. The quiet apologies that once lived in my throat came back, but this time, they didn't feel like mine. A sharp buzz interrupted the spiral. My phone lit up. Judge Lynette Harlow. I hadn't seen her in person in years. We weren't exactly close, but she'd been a friend of my parents for as long as I could remember. A federal judge with a sharp mind and an even sharper sense of what people left unsaid. Arden, she said when I answered, can you stop by my office this afternoon? There's something I need to speak with you about. In private. That alone was enough to rattle me. I agreed, though my stomach had already begun twisting itself into knots. 2 hours later, I was walking into her office in Midtown Houston. Her assistant waved me through without asking questions. That told me more than anything else. The space was elegant without trying too hard. Shelves lined with law journals, polished wood, and a view of the skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows that made everything feel smaller than it should. She stood when I walked in, but didn't offer a smile, just a quiet, firm nod. Sit down, she said, motioning to the armchair across from her desk. Can I get you some water? She poured it before I could answer. Just that. 1 glass for me, 1 for her. No speech, no pity. That simple act cracked something inside me. I hadn't been offered care without a catch in years. I know this isn't easy, she said, sitting across from me, but I need to ask you something. I nodded. I was at the rehearsal dinner last night, she said, voice even. I saw how your family spoke to you. My whole body tensed. My throat burned. "And I was in the hotel lobby this morning," she added. "I heard the last 10 minutes of that conversation." The humiliation rose like heat from my chest to my ears. My instinct was to shrink, deflect, change the subject. But I didn't. She leaned forward, her voice soft but firm. "Arden, you weren't a disgrace. You were being cornered." The words were so gentle, they nearly shattered me. I looked away, trying to swallow the lump rising in my throat. "How long has this been happening?" she asked. My answer came out broken. "Since, I don't know, forever maybe." I cleared my throat. They always expected me to take the hit. Smile through it. Be grateful. She stayed quiet, letting my words breathe. Even when Corbin screwed up, I had to fix it. When things went sideways, it was on me to make it right. No one ever said it out loud, but I knew. I was shaking now, not visibly, but somewhere deeper, my core. She gave me space to collect myself. Then she said, "Arden, your brother is acting like someone preparing a legal takeover." I blinked. "What?" She opened a file folder on the table between us. Forged documents, signatures created under duress, a trail of emails that appear altered. Her eyes met mine. "That's not family drama. That's corporate manipulation." I stared at the folder but didn't touch it. My fingers felt too heavy. She pushed it closer. "Take a look." Inside was a printout of the same contract I'd seen earlier, with my name at the bottom in digital ink. Next to it was a metadata report. Technical, clean. It showed that the file had been edited multiple times, and one of those timestamps traced back to Corbin's home IP address. There it was. Not suspicion, proof. A quiet breath escaped me. Not surprise. Just confirmation of something I'd always known, deep down. "They've been preparing this for months," she said, quietly, carefully. I nodded, barely. She watched me with more concern than judgment. "What do you want to do with this?" The old voice kicked in again. The one that said, "Don't stir the pot. Don't ruin the weekend. Don't be the problem." But another voice, a newer one, rose up louder. "If you don't act, they will take everything." "I don't know," I muttered. "I don't want to blow up the wedding. That's not who I am." Her eyes softened, but her words didn't. Defending yourself isn't blowing anything up. It's survival. That landed harder than I expected. My silence hadn't been peacekeeping. It had been surrender, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. Before I stood to leave, she added quietly, "Arden, tomorrow we'll push every line you've drawn. Be ready." I nodded, though I didn't feel ready at all. Walking back out into the afternoon heat, I could feel the Houston humidity settle around my shoulders. Heavy, sticky. I climbed into my truck and shut the door. The air inside was still and thick. And then it happened. Tears. Not from weakness, not from fear, but from finally seeing the full shape of what had been done to me. It wasn't just a bad family dynamic. It wasn't just emotional tension. It was control, and it had gone on for too long. I whispered, half to myself, half to the version of me I'd left behind. "This ends now." The screen was still lit when I blinked away the tears. "Corbin, if you don't sign by tonight, you won't be allowed inside the wedding tomorrow." I stared at it for a long time. The words didn't surprise me, but the boldness did. He wasn't even pretending anymore. No manipulation cloaked in sweet words. Just a demand. Sharp, cold, and final. My thumb hovered over the screen. I didn't reply. Instead, I leaned back in my seat, head against the headrest, letting the weight of it all settle into my chest. Judge Harlow's voice echoed faintly in my mind, her calm tone, her measured words. That's not family conflict. That's corporate aggression. But right now, it didn't feel strategic or legal. It felt personal and cruel. Another buzz. Corbin again. Do not embarrass us tomorrow. Show up with the papers signed or don't show up at all. The blood in my ears pounded louder than the hum of traffic outside. My jaw locked, my hands curled into fists. I hadn't even replied to the first message. And already, the pressure doubled. My chest tightened. Then came another ping. This time from my mother. Mom, Corbin told us you're refusing again. We need you to sign tonight. Don't ruin his wedding. No greeting. No question. Just an order, wrapped in guilt. And barely 2 minutes later, another message came through. Dad, you owe this family. Be a man and sign. I read that one twice, staring at it like it was in another language. I'd seen those words before, in tone, if not exact phrasing. When I was 16 and begged to quit the night shift at the warehouse, when Corbin totaled my car, and somehow I was the one made to apologize for causing tension. Be a man, as if manhood meant silence, as if integrity meant sacrifice. Always mine, never theirs. I dropped the phone in the passenger seat, afraid I might crush it if I held on any longer. Defending yourself is not an attack, Judge Harlow had said. I closed my eyes and repeated it to myself like a prayer. Defending myself is not an attack. And yet, it felt like war. My hands stopped trembling. Instead, they moved, steady, deliberate. I picked up the phone again, scrolled to Corbin's name, and hit call. He picked up on the second ring. What now? He barked. I didn't raise my voice. I'm not signing tonight. Silence, just for a second, then a burst of anger. You ungrateful idiot. I'm doing you a favor letting you come at all. I let him rage. Let him spit his version of events, his threats dressed as favors. When he paused for breath, I spoke. You're not doing me a favor, Corbin, I said, calm. And you don't own me. That shut him up. I heard his breath catch just before I ended the call. The click echoed louder than it should have in that silent truck. For the first time in years, I hadn't let him have the last word. Still shaking, I reached behind the passenger seat and pulled out a small folder. White, clean, sealed. Inside were the documents Judge Harlow had given me. The forged contract, the metadata analysis, the IP trace. I took a Sharpie from the glove box, uncapped it, and wrote on the front of the envelope in firm, all-caps letters, for safekeeping. I didn't drive straight home. Instead, I turned down a side road toward the small, secure drop box Judge Harlow once mentioned in passing. Just in case you ever need to store something sensitive, she'd said. I slid the envelope inside and closed the metal lid. This wasn't revenge. It was self-defense. On the way back, I took the long route, passed by Willow Creek Chapel. Even from the road, I could see the white stone walls lit up under the soft glow of the pathway lights. Everything looked so peaceful, so curated, like nothing messy ever happened inside. And yet tomorrow, inside those walls, a storm was waiting. Hundreds of guests, flowers, music, smiles, all covering a foundation cracked by years of manipulation. I parked across the street and watched the building for a long while, headlights off, motor running low. Would they really turn me away? Would they block their own blood from attending? Would I let them? I whispered to myself. This ends tomorrow. I didn't know what that meant yet, just that something had to shift. Something had to give. Eventually, I drove home. The townhouse was quiet. Still. I walked through the door like someone returning from war, dropped my keys onto the console table, my body moving slow, deliberate, like it was made of stone. I collapsed onto the couch, and there, in the silence, everything hit me. Every insult, every be reasonable. Every time I swallowed my voice so they wouldn't raise theirs. Memories played like a cruel montage. Late nights covering Corbin's mistakes, working overtime to fund his ideas, watching my parents beam at him while barely acknowledging I existed. It was more than unfair. It was erasure. I sat in it for a while. Grief, shame, bitterness, all of it. Then I picked up my phone again. 11 unread messages, each one a variation of the same refrain. Sign it. Don't ruin this. Stop making everything about you. I stared at the screen. For once, I didn't feel the urge to explain or defend. I went to settings, scrolled down, and powered the phone off. That small act, the absence of response, felt more powerful than a scream. I wasn't going to be the obedient son tonight. I wasn't going to be the scapegoat. I wasn't going to be accessible. I stood slowly, exhaustion in every joint, and made my way toward the bedroom. But I didn't make it more than 5 steps before something changed. Headlights flared through my living room window. Bright, close, sudden. Someone had pulled into my driveway. For a moment, I thought the headlights belonged to someone who'd taken a wrong turn, but as they swung across my living room wall, the shape of the car came into focus. My father's old blue sedan, the same one he'd driven since I was a teenager. Both my parents stepped out. My father moved quickly, shoulders tense, while my mother stayed a half step behind, arms wrapped around herself as if she needed something to hold on to. My stomach tightened. I already knew why they were here. I opened the front door halfway, intending to talk to them from the porch. My father didn't wait for that. He pushed the door wider and brushed past me into the living room like he owned the place. He scanned the space, eyes sharp, as though he expected to find the signed papers tucked under a pillow. My mother stayed at the threshold. She kept staring at the floor, refusing to meet my eyes, which somehow hurt more than any accusation could. My father turned toward me. "What's wrong with you? Corbin said you hung up on him." His voice filled the room, loud, cutting, heavy. It had been years since he'd spoken to me that way, but the sound of it pulled old memories back. Nights when a raised voice meant I'd done something wrong, even if no one could explain what that wrong was. I stayed quiet. My silence only made him angrier. His jaw tightened, the vein in his neck pushing forward. My mother stepped inside, closing the door gently behind her. "Arden," she said, voice soft but firm, "if you care about this family, you'll stop making things difficult. Sign the papers, come to the wedding, and keep the peace." There it was, that old phrase, the one that had followed me through childhood, college, adulthood. Keep the peace. The unspoken rule was always the same. Peace meant surrender, and surrender always came from me. My father stepped closer. "You're embarrassing us. Do you want everyone knowing how selfish you've become?" I felt the breath leave my lungs. Not because his words were new, but because they were so familiar. They'd said versions of that line every time they wanted something I didn't want to give. I steadied myself. "I'm not giving Corbin 70% of my company." My father's eyes narrowed. "You don't get to be stubborn now. Not after everything we've done for you." Done for me. That was the line that finally cracked something inside my chest. Because everything they ever did for me came with strings, conditions, threats disguised as expectations. The air in the room felt different now. He could sense I wasn't folding the way I used to. My mother moved closer, her voice trembling. Corbin's the one carrying the family name. He's the one people look up to. Let him lead. My father added, You owe him. He's always protected you. Protected me? Corbin was the one who shoved me into lockers when no one was watching. He was the one who used my savings for a business idea and never apologized. He was the one who ruined my first car and made me apologize for escalating tension. And they called that protection. I had to grip the counter behind me to keep my balance. The room felt too small. They kept closing in, using their old tactics. The pressure tightened around me like a vice. My father held out his hand. Where are the papers? Give them to me. I didn't move. He stepped closer, so close I could see the lines around his eyes. The frustration etched deeper with each second of silence I gave him. My mother touched his arm. Not here, not tonight. He shook her off. You think you're better than us now? Money does that to people. I met his stare. Respect does that. He froze for a moment, long enough for me to see the shock flicker across his face. He'd never heard me talk like that before. Before he could respond, headlights cut across the room a second time. Another car pulled up. Then came the slam of a door. Corbin. He pushed inside without knocking, face flushed, breath uneven. What did you say to Dad? Before I could answer, he got right up in my face. He jabbed a finger into my chest hard enough to sting. You're coming tomorrow. You're signing. I don't care if I have to drag you into that chapel. My father didn't stop him. My mother turned her head away. Corbin shoved me, harder this time. My back hit the counter edge, and pain shot up my ribs. Something in me straightened, not out of anger, not because I wanted to fight, but because I had finally reached a point where I couldn't bend any further. I stood up slowly, and my posture alone made Corbin hesitate, just for a second, but long enough for me to notice. I said, If you touch me again, you're not going to like what happens next. My voice wasn't loud or shaking. It was calm, controlled, and that's exactly why it rattled him. My mother began crying, loud, dramatic, her favorite way to turn the blame onto me. You're tearing this family apart, she said. My father pointed at the door. If you don't come tomorrow and handle this the way you should, don't bother coming back. I nodded. I hear you. They didn't realize I meant something different than what they assumed. Corbin brushed past me again as he left, but there was less force behind it now. My father followed, tense and silent. My mother lingered for a moment, looking at me as though I'd committed some unforgivable sin. You're breaking this family, she whispered. Then she walked out. The door slammed behind them, leaving the house in sudden, hollow quiet. I stood there shaking, not from fear, but from clarity, from the realization that tonight wasn't about convincing me. It wasn't even about negotiation. They came to break me before the wedding, and they failed. The red glow of taillights faded into the quiet street, swallowed by the soft gray of dawn. I stood behind the closed door, still in yesterday's clothes, still holding the silence they left behind. My fists were clenched, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was restraint. I had just started to turn off the porch light when I saw her, Mrs. Halford. She was walking slowly up the steps, bundled in a faded shawl, a small clamshell phone in one hand, and a folded piece of paper in the other. Arden, she called out gently, her voice hoarse like she hadn't used it all night. Honey, I saw everything. I stepped outside. The morning air still carried that heavy, wet quiet only found before sunrise. Her eyes were rimmed red. They shouldn't have done that to you. I opened the door wider and she walked in without hesitation, like she had a purpose. She moved to the kitchen table, hands trembling slightly as she opened her phone. I didn't mean to record it at first, she said. I saw the shouting and it scared me. She pressed play. The video was grainy, a little shaky, shot through her living room window. But the audio was clear enough. My father yelling. My mother's voice cracking into that manipulative cry she saved for moments like these. Corbin shoving me into the counter so hard, the sound of impact made her flinch beside me. Then my voice. If you touch me again, you're not going to like what happens next. I hadn't realized how steady I sounded until I heard it played back. Mrs. Halford wiped her cheeks with the sleeve of her sweater. I didn't know. I knew they weren't kind. But this? She handed me the folded note. I found this stuck under their windshield wiper after they left. I figured maybe you should see it. I opened it. My brother's handwriting, jagged, sharp, all caps like he always wrote when angry. Make sure he signs before the ceremony. If not, distract the guests until we get the papers from him by force. I read it twice before I sat down. By force. I stared at those words, not even hidden in metaphor, just written there like it was business as usual. Mrs. Halford spoke softly. They were going to corner you, in front of everyone, like you were the problem. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. I'd spent my life swallowing things like this, shifting blame, covering bruises made with words, apologizing for the air I took up. But now it was printed. Now it was visible. Now it wasn't just in my head. A slow, quiet sentence formed in me. A vow. No more. I looked at her. Thank you for everything. She smiled sadly. You deserve better than this, Arden. Don't let them win. I nodded. She stayed while I showered, dressed, pulled myself together. While I shaved, she packed a small container with boiled eggs, toast, a thermos of coffee, just in case you forget to eat, she said. It was the kindest act anyone had offered me in years. Before she left, she touched my face, gently cupping my cheek the way a mother should. Go get your life back. Her words stayed with me all the way to Willow Creek. The sun was climbing now, cutting clean through the windshield as I drove. I passed families walking their dogs, joggers in neon gear, kids dragging suit bags into church buildings. To anyone else, it was just another Saturday. But not for me. My hands were steady on the wheel, my chest calm. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking into a trap hoping to survive it. I was walking into it knowing exactly what I carried. The parking lot was full. Pastel suits, linen dresses, guests already posing for photos under the archway of pale yellow roses. Laughter and polite smiles buzzed in the air. They had no idea what kind of family they were celebrating. I parked near the back and opened the glove box. The sealed envelope sat right where I left it, documents from Judge Harlow, now joined by the grainy video and Corbin's written threat. I added one final note, to be opened only if I disappear. Just in case, I stepped out into the sun. Inside the chapel, everything was already in motion. Staff bustled through side doors. Someone shouted about florals being out of order. I moved through the back hallway where the groomsmen would gather. And that's where she found me, my mother. Her dress was flawless, hair sprayed into place like a statue, but her eyes, they looked carved from glass. "You're late," she said flatly, like she was rehearsing. I didn't blink. "I'm here." Her head snapped around, checking to see who might be watching. "Please, Arden, don't make a scene today. Don't embarrass us." That word again, Not protect yourself. Not are you okay. Not even a hint of remorse. Just don't embarrass us. From behind her, another voice joined in, lower, gruffer. My father. He stepped forward, fixing his tie like it was the priority. You brought the papers, right? I looked him in the eyes. No. His jaw tightened, the muscle along his cheek jumping. We'll handle it inside, he said, trying to sound calm. No, I answered quieter. You won't. They exchanged a look, the same kind of look they used to share before punishing me as a child, when they thought I wouldn't notice the coordination. Then I saw Corbin. He was across the hallway, sleeves rolled up, face hard. He saw me and moved fast. 10 feet. 6. The wedding coordinator buzzed past us. 10 minutes to processional. All groomsmen, take your spots. But no one was listening. Corbin walked like he had something to prove. I braced myself, not in fear, but in readiness. Every second of humiliation, every favor repaid with betrayal, every moment I was forced to vanish while he played the star. It all sat there in my chest, ready to speak. He got within arm's reach, and that's when the chapel doors opened behind him. Judge. Harlow stepped inside. As Corbin turned to face her, his smirk slipped. The moment Judge Harlow crossed the threshold of the chapel, everything stilled. The room, once humming with soft pre-wedding chatter, fell into breathless silence. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her presence cut through the space with the quiet force of a gavel. Corbin stood frozen, halfway down the aisle. My parents flanked the side wall, stiff and stone-faced. I remained rooted where I was, not out of fear, but readiness. Judge Harlow walked calmly toward me, her tailored black coat swaying slightly with each step. She reached me, gave a slight nod, and asked, "Arden, are you ready?" I met her gaze and nodded once. She turned. With the full weight of the room's attention behind her, she addressed my family. I believe the groom and his parents have been attempting to coerce a fraudulent business transfer, she said, each syllable deliberate and clear. Gasps cut across the pews like wind through dry leaves. Someone's drink glass hit the floor with a sharp crack. Corbin blinked like he hadn't understood the words. My mother instinctively reached for my father's arm. He didn't react. Judge Harlow raised a folder. These are the documents submitted last night, along with new evidence received this morning, including video of an altercation, verbal threats, and written proof of intent to extort. Voices swelled, heads turned. Guests began whispering to each other with disbelief thick in their tones. Corbin's voice cracked. That's a lie. My father tried to interject. We can explain. Judge Harlow didn't flinch. No, you've done enough. That's when Corbin snapped. He turned to me, fists tight, eyes wide with rage. You did this. You just couldn't let me have one thing. I didn't raise my voice. You did this to yourself. In a flash, he lunged, not at me, but toward the judge, arms stretched for the folder, but he didn't make it. 2 deputies who'd slipped in with her, quiet as shadows, intercepted him. One gripped his arm, the other blocked his path. It all happened so fast, it took the guests a second to catch up. A woman in the second row whispered, "Is he being arrested?" My mother collapsed into a pew, but her sobs weren't grief. They were the kind born from the shame of being seen. She covered her face with both hands, loud enough for every corner of the chapel to hear. My father remained upright, jaw clenched, fighting to keep some sense of control. "This is a misunderstanding," he insisted. "We are a respected family." Judge Harlow didn't miss a beat. Respect is not a title. It's a record of your actions, and your record speaks for itself. The hush in the room was no longer silence. It was judgment. Whispers rolled through the guests. I always thought something was off about Corbin. They tried to take his company? All that money, and they still tried to steal. I looked out across the crowd, people I'd grown up with, neighbors, family friends, old coworkers of my parents. And for the first time, I wasn't the one shrinking. I wasn't hiding. Judge Harlow looked at me. It was my turn. I stepped forward. For most of my life, I began, I thought being loyal meant staying quiet. I thought family meant giving up pieces of yourself until there's nothing left. Dozens of faces locked on mine. But I built my company from the ground up. Every hour, every late night, every sacrifice, it was mine, not theirs. I've been silent too long. Today, I'm choosing something else. I paused just long enough. The truth. A low murmur of agreement moved through the rows. A few nods. Someone in the back said, "Good for him," just loud enough to hear. Corbin twisted out of one deputy's grasp, shouting, "You think this makes you better than us? You think money makes you the good guy?" I looked directly at him. No, but integrity does. That was the crack. His fiancée, still in her ivory gown, appeared at the edge of the scene. She looked like she'd been crying, mascara faintly smudged, lips trembling. "Corbin," she asked, her voice shaking, "is it true?" He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. She didn't wait for a reply. Her hand went to the ring on her finger. With a slow, deliberate motion, she slid it off and held it out. "I can't marry someone who would do this," she whispered. The room erupted. Voices, gasps, rustling fabric, the shifting of feet and chairs. The moment cracked open. A quiet war turned public spectacle. Judge Harlow turned to my father, calm as ever. She handed him a notice. "This document voids any claim related to the attempted business transfer. You will receive formal charges regarding coercion and fraud." My father's face drained of all color. My mother raised her eyes to mine, red, swollen. "Arden, please, we're still your parents." I nodded, not out of agreement, but recognition. "I know, and that's what makes this so hard. But I'm done being the person who breaks so this family doesn't." There was no yelling, no fight, just finality. I turned and walked out. Sunlight hit my face as the chapel doors closed behind me. I didn't run. I didn't tremble. I just breathed. Mrs. Halford stood by the car. She smiled as I approached and rested her hand on my forearm. "You did what they thought you never would," she said softly. "I'm proud of you." I nodded once, feeling the full weight of the moment settle in my chest. It wasn't joy. Not yet. But it was peace. And peace was enough, for now. I opened the driver's door, slid into the seat, and sat still. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. One voicemail. 4 seconds long. I pressed play. A familiar voice whispered, "We need to talk. It's about the company."